it shouldn't be posed as an either-or issue. The U.S. is big enough and diverse enough that there's opportunities to get going on both in different places. The key is to be able to figure out which place to do which one in, and also to figure out how to do it. Right now we could, if we really tried hard and spent lots of money, maybe get on the incremental one and do that ourselves. If we don't open up to global experience better, we'll never be able to do the other one in an economic way. When we talk about costs, the cost of trying to reinvent the high-speed rail wheel, when we dropped it in sort of 1969 with the Metroliner, would be enormous. So yes, but in the right places, and only if we're able to not be too hubristic and say we have to do it all ourselves.
I think the transport geography of the U.S. also answers that question a little bit. I live in El Paso. El Paso is 580 miles from the state capital of Austin. Between Austin and El Paso, with that 580 miles, there's maybe a couple thousand, coyotes, some rattlesnakes, and that's pretty much it. So you could basically drive an airplane along the interstate as fast as you could. So while some of those, there are areas of the country that may have longer distances between them, but there is less right-of-way interference. So I think there is some natural answer to that, at least initially. Well, in places it could go faster, and others it's that are denser that would have to go slower.
For me, I would recommend investing in upgrading the current infrastructure that we have and working on an average rail speed increase overall. So I mentioned the bridge across the Niagara River that was built in 1873. When you think about how much money it would cost to replace that one bridge, probably $500 million to $1 billion, realistically, and a 10-year project just on that bridge alone. And I don't know about the West, but the Northeast is full of those kinds of situations. I look around the city I live in outside of Buffalo, and all the infrastructure is built like 1910. And pieces of the bridges are falling off. And that's where I would put my money, and I think it'll add up to $100 billion relatively quickly, just focusing on the current rail infrastructure that we have.
I guess I go for incrementalism as well, but I just want to give you a sad story. My mom and dad used to live in New Jersey. That's not the sad part.
Wow.
They lived in a place where there was a local railway. It was an electrified system, and they wanted to move a line. There were two lines that were about a half a mile apart. This is in Montclair and Bloomfield and Boonton, if you know that area. And it took them, when we moved there, it was 1977. When they left there in 2002, after over 25 years of planning and environmental impact assessments, they had still not reopened or opened this new line, and it opened just after they left. It took about 30 years from the first proposal, all of the statements, all of the planning, and it was only a half a mile. It was a really short line. It was one level crossing, so there wasn't even a tunnel involved. So incrementalism, I think, would be interesting, but you might discover that there are problems. But there are certainly bottlenecks on the system. And if you can go to people who use the system and convince them that those bottlenecks need to be removed, you'll have their support. If you do it on your own, you're not going to get very much support. But you need to look for allies. So incrementalism is easier. Doing the small bits first is simply easier. And if you can build up a bigger constituency, maybe eventually you can move towards a bigger project.
I'll just make one comment, and it's a comment on us, basically. We haven't raised the gas tax in this country since 1992. It's 18.3 cents a gallon. We live in a country where if you raise my taxes, I kick you out of office. So the answer is we're going to have to fundamentally dig inside ourselves and say, where's this money? We have to pay for it. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy to think that we're building 21st century infrastructure on 20th century dollars. I mean, this is not sustainable. You want to know why we're in a budget crisis? Because we want more than we're willing to pay for it. That's got to change. We're not going to build high-speed rail until somebody comes out and says it's going to cost money, and this is an investment in your children's future. I just don't see it otherwise. But that'd be my argument.
Quantitative easing.
My suggestion is that this kind of dichotomous thinking is not helpful. In Europe, you have a high-speed rail network that runs from Stockholm, Sweden to Rome, Italy. There's not many people who ride the train from Stockholm Sweden to Rome, Italy, but there is a network. Just like there's not many people who drive from New York to San Francisco on the US national highway network. But it's a network in that it's connected, and people can take overlapping trips in any combination and permutation on that network. Some of that will be air related, especially if we have a post-carbon shock with air travel costs on oil. There, despite all the hype about biofuels, aviation is still utterly dependent on cheap liquid hydrocarbons, and business class air travel is less price sensitive than discretionary, but still there's a lot of opportunity for that, depending on when and how the input costs to aviation change. But again, I just emphasize that building a national network does not mean that someone's going to get on the train at Penn Station and get off in San Francisco in a day and a half or something. I might do that, but the system can work very successfully without many more doing just that.
I guess I'd like to say though that the business class argument, I agree with it actually. The people who would be using high-speed rail would probably be business travelers. But there is a slight problem about selling that to the general public. Business travelers, especially today, are viewed as being exceptionally wealthy people, they're the 1%. So what you're saying is, we're going to build a system that caters to the 1% and ignore the other 99%. And so that might be politically unacceptable. In addition to that, most airlines are losing money. You're saying, hey, we're going to build a system which is going to offer business class travel between relatively short-haul destinations. And there might be some airlines that would say, great, we can give up our services, but others would say, gosh, we make a lot of money from those routes, you're cutting into our services. If they get a subsidy, oh my God, the outcome would be horrendous. One of the differences between the US and, say, Europe, or China for that matter, is that airline space or airline gates in airports are limited. Airport space is rationed in effect. And so Heathrow, for example, is having a big debate. They want to build a third runway for Heathrow in London. The government have said no, there isn't enough space for all the flights they want to have. If you can cut out short-haul flights and replace them with rail travel, that means your airport can become better connected globally. So if we had business travel on high-speed trains and it were linked up to particular airlines with frequent flyer programs, and you could feed in and funnel it to the airport, and you could fly from a hub city off to Europe or San Francisco or wherever, that might work. But I think it would be a very hard sell to just say we have business travel in mind. And that's one of the problems with high-speed rail, because in a sense, you have to appeal to a broad market, but in some ways, I don't want to say you get untruthful, but you might have to be somewhat politically incorrect in promoting the system.
I would add to that there are a fair number of short-haul airline service routes that are operated that I get the strong impression, economically as well as service-wise, the airline isn't really interested in operating. I'm sure American was quite pleased to fly me from Dallas to New York to get here, but they had to fly me from El Paso to Dallas in the first place. That's not their profitable route. So in this concern about what role of the airlines or what future of the airlines, I think you might actually see the potential over time for some airlines to be relieved to not have to offer service that is less profitable, and thus they can invest in some of their more profitable service lines, because high-speed rail has taken up some of the slack and some of the demand that they're sort of forced to provide to really make their hub and spoke system operate as efficiently as it can.